Okay, welcome, Read 516. This is week 9. And as always, we'll go over our upcoming assignments and readings. Okay, so you have a few readings this week. Our first one will be in Lipson and Wixon, which we haven't really read in a while. And this will be going over IRIs, which are informal reading inventories. You have the core book, and then you also have an article on fluency. So our main focus for this week is discussing oral reading fluency and comprehension. So looking back over here at the core that you're supposed to read, it goes over an oral reading fluency measure. It's a little bit different than the IRI. And then here it'll discuss specifics of the components of literacy. Okay, so here are some assignments that are due this week. You need to plan your second session with your student. And I have an early Christmas present for you. You will not be needing to do a WAPR for your first session. I figure that most of you are pretty good at analyzing the interest of your student, and there won't be too many assessments that will be done this week. So it's just the interest inventory, the MRP, and then administering the Cure-I word list, which will get you ready for session 2. All right, so looking forward to session 2, you're going to be using your word list to identify what passage to begin. So you have 2 areas that you'll need to do assessments, which is the narrative and the expository. And for each genre, you will need to find their instructional and or independent levels. And you're also going to be doing an oral fluency assessment on them. So you're going to be using the Hasbrouck and Tyndall rubric and Brzezinski's multi-dimensional fluency rubric. So over here, I know it notes it as optional, but this is something that you need to do. I only included over here just to kind of leave more space in this area. So again, you'll be doing the Cure-I in narrative expository, noting Hasbrouck and Tyndall and the multi-dimensional fluency rubric. Okay, so looking forward to your WAPR number 2, you're going to want to make sure you include some descriptive statistics for the narrative and expository passages. So there is some good tables in your Lipson and Wixon. You're going to want to include words per minute even if the student reads silently, but I highly advise that your student read out loud. You're also going to need your words correct per minute. Include the percentile for fluency. And then also using that scale to rank their fluency. Oops, let's go back really here. Okay, and so make sure you do these properly because there is a formula to find their words per minute and words correct per minute. Okay, so here are some tables that you can use when reporting the data. So I just wanted to give you some examples so you can kind of organize your information a little bit better. It makes it easier to read rather than writing it in narrative form. So you would write the passage on top, the level, what type is it? Is it a narrative or expository? You're going to be including your accuracy, your acceptability, again, words correct per minute, words per minute, fluency score, how familiar they are with the topic, retelling percentage, and so forth. So many components, and as you can see, it's really easy to read if it's in a table format. Okay, and here's another one. Okay, so it's really kind of up to you on what table you want to use and what you're looking for with your student. And yet another one. Okay, so the Cure-I has some, the Lipson and Wixon has one. And you can also just make your own. Oh, just be sure that if you do make your own, you are including all the important components of the Cure-I assessment. Okay, so looking even more towards the week after that, this is session number 3, which you'll be doing the core reading maze. comprehension and 2 additional comprehension assessments. Okay, so for week 9, we will be discussing the IRIs and the CURIs. You should be familiar with the CURI. I know that this assessment, as mentioned before, is very lengthy, and sometimes it takes a while to get used to the administering process and noting the miscues and just knowing how to calculate all the information. And so just know that a CURI is an IRI. It's just what that company calls it, the CURI. Okay, so our objective for our online session is to report and analyze results for an informal reading inventory, the CURI. So by the end of this session, I hope that you are a little bit more comfortable with reporting the results and analyzing them as well. Okay, so let's just go over the informal reading inventories, and this is going to be a brief overview. So these are generally tests that are individually administered, though I think the CURI gives an option to do a group test, but generally speaking, this is an individually administered reading test, and it's usually composed of 2 things: the graded word lists and the graded passages with the comprehension questions. Now, as mentioned, there are many variations, but they usually have similar components. All right, so what is the purpose of the IRI? Well, it generally is used to help make decisions about matching students to text, so finding their independent, instructional, and frustration reading levels. And that way, you as a teacher know what kind of text would be most appropriate for that student. Also, some districts do use it for progress monitoring, or they can use it as an indication of student achievement. And it's also really helpful in finding areas of strengths and weaknesses for word recognition and comprehension, especially when you're analyzing those miscues and looking at the types of questions that the student got correct or the ones that the student missed. Okay, so here are some bits and pieces of the IRI. So as mentioned, the graded word lists and the graded reading passages, and the comprehension questions for the reading passages. Okay, so the graded word lists. These are lists that correspond with the grade level's core reading materials, and they're used to determine accuracy of word recognition in isolation. So note, isolation. So this would not be a good indicator of the student's overall reading ability. Mostly it is used to assist in finding out what grade level passage to begin with. Okay, words should be presented individually or in a list format. So I like to call it a peekaboo folder. So when you are introducing the word list to the student, you are not just giving them a whole list of words like grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. You're giving them individually. Okay, and sometimes for the younger students, you can present the words one by one. As you did with your previous student, you are going to begin 2 years below grade level, and then you're going to find out where they receive 100% accuracy. So you either need to go up or down depending how they performed on that first list. Make sure you write down substitutions, and this can be timed, untimed, or both. And so, as mentioned before, there's lots of variations out there with IRIs. So some might suggest doing it timed, some might say untimed, some might give you that option. But when you are administering an IRI, you should probably stick to the procedures that they suggest. And then things to keep in mind is, how do you handle self-corrections and the time factor when you're doing the timing? All right, the oral reading passages. These are passages that should begin with where the student scored independent on the word list. So if your student scored 100% accuracy for grade 3 word list, then you should begin on the grade 3 passage. And as noted, if the If a student does poorly on the passage, you're going to have to drop down a level until performance is satisfactory. As a student reads, you're going to code and mark every deviation from the printed text. And since you always can't score these immediately, you have to make a decision on whether or not you should stop testing, because sometimes the student might appear to be really frustrated with a certain passage, so you might need to take a break and then go to a passage at a lower level. So it's up to the examiner on when to stop testing. And these passages can also be used for silent reading or listening comprehension. For listening comprehension, you would be reading the passage to the student. Okay, this is a slide that you have seen before, but this is total accuracy versus total acceptability. And this just gives you a list of what kind of miscues are counted when calculating accuracy and acceptability. Oops, let me go back, right. Oops, there we go. And so the big one here would be self-corrections are counted as a miscue with accuracy. Okay, when you are scoring their oral reading, make sure you know the proper calculation. You are subtracting errors from total words, words correct, divided by total words, and you multiply this by 100. Okay, comprehension questions. After the student reads, passage is removed and questions are asked. On the Curai, it suggests taking away the passage and then giving the student the text if they missed a problem and repeating the question. Examiner reads question and provides wait time. If the student doesn't respond or appears confused, the question may be asked again or rephrased. You can also ask, can you tell me more? To score, decide if answer is correct, incorrect, or partially correct. And then you're going to determine overall percentage correct and then percentage correct for each type of question. So what I meant by each type of question, is it an inference? Is it a main idea? Is it a detail? And so you're calculating the certain percentage for each type of comprehension question. All right, so the reading rate. We've done this before, so you're going to have to find the words per minute for silent and or oral. And as mentioned earlier, you're going to want to, I highly suggest oral because you're going to want to get that multidimensional fluency scale score. So again, highly recommend oral. And you can just take a moment to look at this on how to determine the words per minute. And then you're also going to use the Hasbrouck and Tyndall estimate to find an appropriate rate for grade level. So remember, make sure to note their percentile. Okay, so what can an IRI tell us? So it can give us some quantitative information and some qualitative. So quantitative, as we all know, is just the hard numbers. Words correct per minute, words per minute, accuracy, acceptability, the percentage for comprehension questions. Moving towards qualitative, we are analyzing those miscues. We are looking closely at the comprehension questions. What questions did they get right? If they did get that question right, how much information did they give us? If they missed the question, what type of question was it? Was it a question that encouraged them to make an inference from the text? Were they allowed to look back at the text? So this is where you're looking at a little bit more closely, and you're really trying to look for a pattern when it comes to the comprehension questions and or the miscues. So here would be, you would write more of a narrative summary of their qualitative information. Here it's just giving me percentages and noting just all the hard numbers for that test. Okay, so limitations, I will stop right here.